Dns Sec. So this is one of the longest video that I've done in my whole life. Before going through the explanation, I would like to thank Alex, who helped me a lot because I was facing a lot of issues within this project, and the key thing that helped us overcoming over these issues and obstacles is thinking how to consider obstacles as challenges. And yeah, therefore by the end of the day we managed to find solutions and to get the result that we were looking for. So I presume that most of you guys knows what does DNS mean and how does it work. So let's assume, just imagine that currently you are within your computer, and while you search for YouTube, what your computer does, it sends a request to the DNS asking for the IP address for the URL of the YouTube. And what does DNS? Basically, it sends back a response which include or contains the IP address for the URL requested. But the only thing that lacks within this scenario is that there is no authenticity and integrity, because the thing is that we don't know whether this is the right DNS that we are talking to or not. So it could be like a hacker who sends the response to our computers and sends, for example, phishing websites, and bingo, he got what he wants. So the DNS Sack, it brought like really great solution for that, and it is known as Domain Name System Security Extensions, or DNS Sack. Is a set like of extensions that adds an additional layer of security on DNS server by enabling responses sent to DNS client to be validated. When DNS resolver queries a zone that is signed by DNS Sec, the authenticity and integrity of its responses are ensured with the use of security keys. So for this task, we will prepare the requirements to successfully test DNS Sec on Windows Server 2016 by creating new zone. I will get into that in a minute. Adding resource records, installing a non-authoritative DNS server, and lastly installing secondary domain controller. So yeah, before explaining the first part, here's our lab network, which will contain 4 computers and 3 servers of them. Basically, there's plub DC1, plub DM01, and plub SA01. And here's the plub Windows 10. This is going to be like a normal PC. So do not get distracted. We will get into that into a second. Just give us a second. So first of all, in the first part, as I said, we'll be creating a zone for testing purposes. You might be wondering, what is a zone? Basically, if you look into DNS, if you divide it logically, you will get domains. But if you divide it physically, you'll get zones. So in this computer, it's hard, the whole paper is messed up. That's fine. So in this server, basically what we're gonna do, we're gonna first implement the zone, which will be called secure.practicelabs.com. And then we will come to creating sample resources record, which simply means that we'll be creating within this this server 2 hosts. The first host will be associated with this IP address, and the second host will be associated with this second IP address. Yeah. Now comes a stage where we'll be creating a non-authoritative DNS server. Basically, in this stage, this non-authoritative DNS server will be installed into plub DM01 device. So basically, this server will not be used for resolving names, in the lab network, as it will not host any readable DNS zone. It will be used instead for storing DNS Sec keys from plub DC01 server that is hosting the securepracticelab.com zone. And yeah, after that, let me show you. I've organized the whole thing, so hopefully it's clear and eligible for anyone. Now comes the last stage of the first part. So then we'll be creating secondary domain control, and the reason why we're creating this secondary domain control simply to demonstrate how DNS Sec keys are transferred between the DNS servers. So this is the main or the rationale behind of secondary domain controller. Now it's part 2. Let me figure out where is policy paper. It's here. Sorry guys, sorry. Yeah, here's the part 2. So basically we're almost done, guys, just bear with me please. So for this part 2, we'll be configuring the DNS Sack. This is one of the it's going to be the main part for the whole thing. As I mentioned in the first part, we were just preparing DNS for DNS Sack, but we still haven't configured or installed or implemented the DNS Sack yet. So what we'll be doing is that we'll be configuring the DNS Sack on a zone. It's like an easy and straightforward process using the DNS manager, as most of the important settings for signing the zone are provided by DNS Sec wizard. In this part, we'll enable DNS Sec on the securepracticelabs.com zone and distribute the keys with the use of trust anchors among servers. So I know that you might be wondering what is trust anchor. It's simply like set of keys that protects DNS server as it signs the zone and validates DNS responses to DNS Sec over client computer. Yeah, you need to emphasize on this point. So yeah, then comes the stage where we'll be distributing the TA or trust anchor to a non-authoritative DNS server. And the reason why we're passing through this step is simply because to test the distribution of DNS Sec keys, and also called the trust anchor TA, among DNS servers such as non-authoritative DNS server and a domain controller that is running as DNS server. So yeah, after passing through this stage, and then comes this stage which is going to be verification of DNS key trust anchor. After distribution of the DNS key trust anchor to a non-authoritative DNS server, we will now test if the trust anchor can be detected by DNS Sec aware client. Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, that you have to make sure that you understand what is DNS Sec aware clients, such as Windows 8 and higher versions. In our case, it's going to be the Windows 10 who is installed within this computer, plugwin 10, to detect the DNS key of the trust anchors on the practice labs on the network. Yeah, now comes the one yeah, still more stages, but that's fine. So in this step, typically DNS Sec keys are copied to other DNS servers for redundancy, purposes, and they create an island of trust between the DNS servers that host the signed DNS zone, let's say. So in this part, or in this step, we will replicate the DNS Sec trust anchors to the secondary domain controller that we previously configured. After that, in this step, query assigned zone without DNS Sec validation required. Basically, the securepracticelabs.com zone has been signed with DNS Sec. So in this step, we will test if a signed zone can be queried without the DNS Sec validation. I think that you are not aware, I'm not sure, probably some of you that are aware of the meaning of the NRPT. I'm well acquainted with this acronym, which stands for the Name Resolution Policy Table. Let me write it down here for you. NRPT. It stands for the Name Resolution Policy Table. Basically, that one will be used to require the DNS Sack validation when DNS Sack where client queries DNS server. So the NRPT is configurable via local GPO or the group policy for local testing, or domain group policy for domain environments. So this part is related with that part. And then after setting up a domain-based group policy for DNS Sec validation, we'll run a query to resolve a resource record, or it is known as RR, which stands for resource record, on the signed securepracticelabs.com zone. And then in the last stage, we will pass through this query assigned zone with DNS Sec validation required. And we're almost done, guys. And here's the last part, which will be so short comparing to the previous part. So basically in this part we will be customizing the DNS Sec. So as Alex explained to me, that the DNS Sec wizard provides a set of default settings for, I would say, sign zone, and in a similar way we can sign zone using customized settings by using the DNS Sec feature of DNS Manager, which is really come in handy. For example, a change in the security key on plub DC01, which hosts the secure practice labs.com, will create a mismatch among the DNS servers that hold a copy of trust anchor key. Therefore, the new security key needs to be updated on all servers to enable validation. So within this part, we will unsign the secure practice lab.com zone and re-sign it again using custom parameters. We'll notice the effect of re-signing the DNS zone on the other servers that hold copies of DNS Sec keys or trust anchors from the first signing. And yeah, this is the steps as I mentioned. And in the last stage, on a non-authoritative DNS server, on that one which is installed on the this server plub DM01, the DNS Sec keys must be copied manually to enable validation. So for this part, we will copy the keys on the plub DM01 to test the validation on a non-authoritative DNS server. And as a result, we will see failed and insecure validation